passe. Super, l'artiste. Super, encore un but sensationnel. That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mahi. Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! De er i semifinale igjen!
Hello everyone and welcome to the Uninformed Handball Hour. Chris O'Reilly here, joined by Alex Kulesh. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing great, Chris. We're recording this on the day of the US election, so anything can happen. But when you're listening to this, you'll know exactly what happened, so won't delve into that. What we do know is that lots of good handball happened over the last week, and a shocking sacking in the world of handball has also happened.
Yes, Maik Machulla has been removed from his duties as Aalborg head coach, and after only just 4 months in the job, we have brought in Lars Bruun-Mortensen, friend of the show, to talk to us about that, the reasons behind it, and what we can expect from Aalborg now and for the rest of the season. That and a few other topics from Danish handball. That's coming up soon. But what was your first impression when you heard that news on Sunday, Alex? I think it was me who broke it to you.
Yeah.
Holy shit was your actual response, but what went through your mind?
It just seems ridiculous. It's 3 months into the season, 4 months into his time in Aalborg, in a new city, with a new club, with a bunch of players who are tired, injured, and they have not been the best team, Aalborg, so far this season. And actually, we were talking about getting Lars to come on this podcast and speak about why they haven't been good. But obviously, the Jan Larsen, the director of handball, answered that question for us, and that is they haven't been good because of the coach. But we'll probably get into that in more detail. I'm shocked. I think you give a new coach, a high-profile coach, more time than a couple of months to make an impact, and you know that it's a time of the season where you have that time. You know that nothing is in peril, but. Maybe Lars knows a bit more. Yeah,
we'll speak in detail about that with Lars shortly. But you know, thinking about the whole peril thing, I mean, where there is a little bit of peril is in the Champions League and Group B, which we figured would be a bloodbath at the beginning of the season, and it is turning out to be. And Kolstad managing to get the victory over Aalborg last week in a very entertaining match of the week. Went right down to the wire, a penalty, won it for Kolstad. But that maybe left Aalborg, who had got a few good results under their belts, maybe feeling a little bit nervy, looking over their shoulder. When you're like, okay, they're on 7 points at the moment. Nantes are just 2 points ahead of them in second place. However, just 2 points behind them in seventh place is Magdeburg. So very little to choose between a huge chunk of teams. And there's a few weeks now until they're back in action. We have the international week this week, then no European games the following week. So a couple of weeks for the new coaching staff to settle in, for them to hopefully, from Aalborg's point of view, get a good run of games in and maybe solidify themselves in the upper echelons of that group. But Group B is just so much fun to watch. And that Kolstad Aalborg game was one of them. But Barca Nantes at the top of the table was a fantastic game, wasn't it?
It was top notch. You just love Nantes in the Champions League. You gotta love Nantes in the Champions League because they put it up against everyone, and they well and truly put it up against Barca. Barca dropping their first points for in the Champions League this season. And to be honest, it came from nowhere. Barca looked really in control for most of the game. They, I was going to look this up, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Barcelona have never lost a game when Dika Mem has scored 9 goals and Emil Nielsen has made 17 saves. I'm going to put my neck on the line here that this has never happened before.
Well, it didn't happen. They didn't lose.
Oh, sorry, they didn't. They didn't not win a game when Dika Mem scores 9 goals and Emil Nielsen scores 17. Saves 17, but. Despite that, Nantes really they woke up, took control of the game, and really could have won, and then could have lost.
That was nuts, that situation.
What actually happened? So the score was 31-31.
Yeah.
Nantes had actually just gone ahead. They were 31-30 up. They made a big run after being down about 3 goals.
They were down by 5 at one point, would you believe?
Down by 5, yeah. And, that run was really led. Well, Aymeric Mien was kind of the leader for Nantes, but I was most impressed with Rok Ovnicek, who just took over in that playmaker position. Only 1 goal, 1 assist, but it was just his decision-making and playmaking that actually got Nantes back into the game. But anyway, they made a huge run to go up. So from 28-30 down, they got up to 31-30. Aymeric Mien got the goal. Barca finally woke up. Blaž Jans equalised with 10 seconds to go. Timeout Nantes. Here we go. Nantes have a chance to win it. And then they don't.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, it's very fitting and ironic that you said that Rok Ovnicek took over, because Rok Ovnicek decided that he was the coach now. I'm the captain now. And he got a little bit excited, Alex, and he decided with a few seconds remaining, Nantes really needed to take their time out once Barca scored the equaliser. And Rok Ovnicek believed that Gregory Kojand, the coach, was too slow getting over to the buzzer. So he ran over to the buzzer and pressed the buzzer, which you're not allowed to do. Only a designated coach is allowed to press the buzzer for a timeout. So because of that, it was a timeout taken, but illegally, and so Rok Ovnicek got a 2-minute suspension, and the ball was turned over to Barca in what could have been the biggest pulling a Norway we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Had Barca gone and won that game, but thankfully for them, Ivan Pesic made a big save right at the buzzer and ensured a draw. However, they would have had about 10 seconds to go down the other end and score the winner. So, yeah, a bittersweet end, but it feels like a point very well earned from Nantes, and a lesson for Rok Ovnicek and everyone that they will never forget. And, I always think that he's a young lad, Rok. He's fine. He's 29. He's 29 and he's been with Nantes since 2019. So it's not a rookie mistake, that's for sure. A terrible rush of blood to the head instead, but they got away with it.
They got away with it. That's actually hilarious. I didn't know what happened. I could not.
I had to go back and watch the. Watch it a couple more times to figure out exactly what happened, because keeping an eye as the goal went in to who was running over to the buzzer, and it was Rok Ovnicek who was like, "Yep, timeout." The kind of thing you'd see in Irish or American handball, but not in the Champions League.
There wouldn't be a buzzer.
Exactly, yeah. Someone waving the timeout card.
I do want to give huge props to Yoshida, the non-Japanese line player, who had an incredible game in defence. So he led that comeback for Nantes from the defensive end. He was playing as a defensive specialist. And he just shut the Barcelona back players down. Attack after attack, he would absolutely eat Digamem alive. He would eat Engasson. He would eat Richardson. It was a joy to watch. So I'm really happy for him to get his moment in the limelight, defensively at least, but not fully. Speaking of defenses, Kiel got destroyed by Fuchs Berlin.
Yes, well,
Kiel and their terrible defense got destroyed by Fuchs Berlin in the Bundesliga. That's probably the biggest game outside of the Champions League last week. Really important for Fuchs Berlin because they had lost 4 out of the last 5 games. A lot of them being in the Champions League. But still, it's a run that was starting to get away from Berlin, basically. Those included losses to Sporting, PSG and Dinamo Bucharest in the Champions League, and a loss against Melsungen in the league. But big win against Kiel, 35-26, putting Fuchs Berlin kind of back into that title race. I think a loss there could have been quite detrimental for them looking long term this season.
And on Kiel, it's like the more things change, the more they say the same. It's the same problems as last season, really, for them. They've brought in Andreas Wolf, but he can't guarantee that he's going to do the business every single time for them. And eventually, their big shooters, who they've relied on, and the new big shooters, Emil Madsen coming in, would have a bad day. Emil Madsen 1 from 10 in his shooting. Ooh. And Eric Johansson 3 from 7. So that says a lot about it. And besides the conceding all the goals, if you're not going to score down the other end, then it's going to be tough for you. And that Bundesliga just continues to spice up week in, week out, and looking forward to seeing how the next few weeks develop as well, because we talked about Melsungen and Hannover Bergdorf still going strong, just about at the top of the table. But let's head in to our interview for this podcast and chat to Lars Bruun-Mortensen about the big sacking at Aalborg and everything else happening in Danish handball at the moment. So welcome again to the podcast, Lars Bruun-Mortensen, joining us from Denmark on the back of what has been a very busy few days in Denmark. Lars, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Busy but good.
Busy but good, that's what we like to hear. And we were already last week, and Alex and I talking about how we should have a chat about what's happening in Denmark, particularly on the men's side. A lot of interesting news, but that has all been trumped by what happened on Sunday morning with the news of Maik Machulla's sacking at Aalborg, which is massive news so early in the season, so early in his tenure. And you actually went to cover them later that day in a league match. So take us through this story and what you make of it.
Yes, I went to Grænsted, it's called. The newly promoted team for the Danish league had a home game against Aalborg on Sunday, and I was not prepared for the press release. Actually had a whole other TV studio production ready for that match, but had to throw it all away. Consider what to do when we had the game on TV. We had heard some rumors about it not being ideal in every way, the relationship between Machulla and the team, but you hear that Lots of times, there's always players who think the coach is not the right one, who wants to play more, or who thinks something should be different. So we were not prepared for it to be now this early. Um, but it was it wasn't a shock. I wouldn't say that, but we were surprised. Everyone was surprised of it being this early in the season, as you say.
I'm completely shocked to be honest, because it just seems like results can't be the only reason for this, because even though Aalborg are, they're about 4 points behind GG and Denmark, but this is the early part of the season. It doesn't really matter. You can change things around. In the Champions League, again, they're in the middle of the table, but they're relatively safe and doing well. Then, what is there any other drivers than just performances that you can pinpoint that may have led to Machulla's sacking?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It isn't the result. At least not only. Of course, they know that they had some matches where they could have done better, but the Danish structure in the league is it doesn't really matter until like March or so, because they will go to the playoffs in the end no matter what. There's no doubt that the culture, the way of Machulla being a coach, and the way they've done things in Aalborg for like 10, 15, 20 years didn't match. And you could say every time you get a new coach, there's always a coach has some ideas that changes the culture a bit, and the culture has to change to the coach. But here there was just too much space between the two things. They couldn't melt together, so to say. And they don't try to hide it in Aalborg. They all said it on Sunday that we made a mistake. The director, the sports director Jan Larsen, he's quite honest about it. This is my mistake. I made a mistake, and it would be a mistake for me, as he said when we had him in our studio. The mistake for me would be if I don't correct my own mistakes, and that's what I'm doing now. So that's why they decided to sack Machulla this early in the season. Yeah. I don't think the players went to management and said you need to get rid of him. That's I could be surprised, but it doesn't seem like it, and the players deny that happened. What you need to know is Jan Larsen, the boss in Aalborg, has been there for so many years. He knows handball. He knows how to read a dressing room, and he saw some things that got him concerned. He saw players who didn't seem as happy, to play as they normally do. And quite simply, if you saw some of the games, they didn't play good. Yeah. And they have so many good players that they should be able to play good. And that made him, talk to some of the people around the club and in the squad, to find out what's up and down in this. And I think the answers he got there made him think, okay, I need to do something about this now, not in 3 months, but now. And that's why it's now.
Yeah, reading some of the responses from players, from Jan Larsen in reports on this, talking about a real clash of cultures in this sense, and the repetition that Aalborg has a very unique culture itself in terms of what they've developed over the 25 years, and how, in a way, it just was an unhappy marriage. But is it, when we also consider that they didn't have the easiest start to the season, also due to some injuries, and which is still affecting the team. We only, for example, saw Nicholas Landin come back to the squad in the last week. Was there anything specific about the way he went about with this team that suggested that it was completely irreversible? Because you can talk about culture and things like that, and I'm sure I'm not sure, but you'd imagine that a coach coming in like this, with such an interesting project and a strong team, might be willing to adapt a little bit to the culture of the team. He doesn't seem like a completely unreasonable man, and they've also said, he's a good guy and has skills as a coach. But what do you think, or what have you heard is just completely irreversible about this situation?
I think it's very important that you say this will be what I've heard, because the details into what is the one reason that we can't do anything else. Of course, nobody wants to talk about that, at least not on camera and with quotes. So I think what people need to understand about not only Danish clubs but perhaps Scandinavian clubs is it's very much a flat structure, so to say. Of course, there's a coach, but players expect to be involved. They expect to know where their position is. They expect to know what the plans is. They expect communication. And I'm sure Machulla has tried to communicate the best way he could. But perhaps, and that is what we hear, the way he is as a coach, perhaps also because of the language barrier. He was actually, I talked to him a few weeks ago, Machulla, at a home game. His Danish was actually getting okay. So maybe if he'd had a few months more, he could have communicated in Danish with some of the people. But that is some of the things that we're hearing, that not everybody felt like, the communication was as good as before. There wasn't quite a unified unit or unified squad as they were before, where everybody's feeling good in the company of each other. So without putting, that is the reason, it seems like there's been more distance between the coach and the players with Machulla than there was before with Stefan Madsen. Could that have changed? I don't know, but there's absolutely no doubt that Jan Larsen and Aalborg, they know what's at stake here, and this is not. We don't do this for fun, and they do this because they want to win the Champions League, so they don't have 6 months to try and see if we can repair this. Just because we think Machulla is a good guy, because they liked him, but handball wise, there just seems to be too much difference in the way they want to do things.
This is becoming a trend, Lars, because just around this time last year, maybe it was a little bit earlier, we brought you on to talk about Gay, who moved on after a long-term coach, brought in an experienced coach, that was Ian Marco Fo at the time, and when things went wrong, immediately got sacked at the start of the season. We're seeing the same with Aalborg. But in that Gay scenario, there was like very particular conflict with players. So it was like Morten-Olsen versus the coach, drama in the dressing room. From what I've read, I haven't seen anything specifically, any player come specifically on the other side of Maik Machulla. But is there anyone who from the Aalborg team that may have kind of driven the coach out?
No, I don't, to be quite honest. I think they are, when you talk about Morten-Olsen in GOG, he was the star. Yes, there was other players. Of course there was. Emil Madsen, one of them. There was other stars, but he was a giant star. And they don't GOG doesn't have as many big stars as Aalborg. I don't think one player in Aalborg could drive this through. There's not one who's so much more of the star in that team that they could just make talk for the whole squad. They have to somehow be unified, at least a handful of them, in what they want. People in Denmark have asked me, did the player sack the coach? And I don't know what to answer to that, because no, in the end, of course they didn't. But if Jan Larsen gets the hint of this being a problem, my players are not happy with this setup, with this way of doing things, he didn't really have a choice. We see that every time in sports, as they always say, at least in football, we can't fire all the players. We can only fire the coach. So no, I don't think that one player has been driving this, had an agenda of let's get rid of him. It doesn't seem like it. I could be surprised. It's Tuesday today, right? It's 2 days ago. So I haven't had that much time yet to check sources around the club to see if maybe small pieces of information gets out in the coming days. We'll see. But this really seems like, just like in the case with the GOG, where Kasper Jørgensen, the sports director in GOG, made a mistake. You know, he didn't do his job. He didn't research enough on who he was hiring. That's the one thing I think Jan Larsen will have to go, and actually is accepting is his responsibility. He did not do his job thoroughly enough here, because then they wouldn't have hired a man who didn't, you know, fulfill the things they want. So I actually think this is just a management in the club who has done this so many years that when they see a mistake, that they correct it quite fast. They're not afraid to admit they made a mistake. If I could just, you know, it's many years ago, but the Danish women's coach for the national team, Jesper Jensen from TG Esbjerg, was also at one point head coach in Aalborg. That's a long time ago. They also had Jakob Vestergaard, who's down in Germany in women's handball now, as a head coach. Both of them very few months in the club before Jan Larsen said, okay, I made a mistake, out with them again. So they have a history of being a club who, when they see this is not what we wanted, we react very quickly.
And now they've, it seems they've given themselves until the end of the season to make a permanent decision. Simon Dale, who was the assistant coach, has now taken over. Henrik Mulgaard has become an official part of the coaching team now.
Official is the right word.
Yeah. What do you think we can expect now from this pair? It seems besides the head coach, nothing will really change in terms of the coaching staff. Will they be focusing on bringing back that joy they spoke about in playing, and I guess maybe revert a little bit to a bit of the style we saw last season?
I think they will. Yeah, that would be the main focus. And as you also point out, you know, the only thing they change is they remove one person, Machulla. They don't bring anything else in, which even more, you know, understates that they saw him as the problem in their setup. I think it's very, you know, it's tactically a clever move from Aalborg to say Simon Dahl will get the season, because they give him, you know, peace and quiet to do his job. They give themselves some peace and quiet because they know that I and other journalists won't call every week to try to find out, okay, who are you hiring tomorrow? So they give themselves some time. I'm not sure it will be the rest of the season. Let's see. It all depends on the results, because, as I said, they're willing to act if they see something's not working. So if this isn't working in 3 months, I'm quite sure they will do something. But of course, even though we talked about, actually, when we here in Denmark, or, you know, in handball, the other clubs and in media, that, well, they pretty much, we guess, have a free selection of coach. We're not used to this in Denmark. You know, every coach in Europe actually being, okay, they could say yes to this project. But I think we are there where they are this big a club now that they can attract many coaches from all over Europe. But all the best coaches have a job right now. So who is the coach who is free in the market, who can come in February? There's probably none. But you don't know. Maybe the candidate they want somehow gets, you know, to be free in the market in the coming months. Who knows? And then they will react. But otherwise, Simon will get the rest of the season. And maybe not many people in Europe know him, but he was a head coach in Nordsjælland in Denmark in the league before. He is a very talented coach. Many of the big clubs are watching him and, you know, following his career, because they think of him as a potential head coach for them sometime in the future. So I won't rule out that he could be the permanent coach if it turns out to be a good setup. But the coming months will tell.
The changes that are going to come with Aalborg, you said changing is, there's basically, the atmosphere is hopefully going to change with Simon Dahl. The style of play will revert back, maybe you could dive into a little bit of what has been going wrong stylistically for Aalborg this season. But additionally, there's two main factors that have added to Aalborg's poor start, and that is Niklas Landin being out. That is just huge. And all the players being tired and cranky and not wanting to play handball because they've been playing handball for 12 months. So those latter two are not going to change. Or Landin is coming back quite soon. But, is it going to be enough just with the change of style for Aalborg? And how much is going to change? And what was in particularly going wrong up to now?
I think the things about in the game, what's went wrong is very hard for me to specifically answer. First of all, I am not a former handball player and handball expert. I'm a journalist, so of course I watch the games. But how Simon Dahl is going to be different from Machulla is difficult to me to say in detail. What you are absolutely right about, and I think that's we have been in contact with Machulla since he was sacked, and he is very disappointed, angry indeed, because he doesn't feel like he got a real shot here, and is saying, have you seen how many injuries we had? And I think that is the main factor here, because there's the players you've seen, who has been publicly quoted of, Landin was out. You could see he didn't play, but there's also players who's been on the team, but were in fact injured or had something in there, so they couldn't play full time, couldn't play to their best. Mads Hoxer just went under surgery, will be out for 5 months. Alex Vlar hasn't played a lot of games because he's had shoulder problems. Thomas Arnoldsen, well, he doesn't know from every time he's played if he's going to play the next match. He doesn't know if his body will be ready 3 days later. And those kinds of question marks, in Machulla's defense, it is very hard to train anything if half your squad isn't available to do that. And players, as you said, has been. They have been tired, mentally tired. Have had a weeks of vacation and then come back to work. People, I could assume I haven't tried it. I had my summer vacation, but I can understand that must be stressful and very hard for them. So I actually think they're gonna get some time off now. Some of the stars are, as Mads Hoxer, for instance, well, they didn't want him to of course be out for 5 months, but they saw a problem in his shoulder, reacted to it now, and then when the World Championships in January are played, it will be without him. He will be completely fresh when they resume the season, for the playoffs in the spring. So I think he has good conditions, Simon Dahl, to do things in this season.
Looking elsewhere in the Danish league, we mentioned GOG earlier and their issues from last season. They're flying at the moment. Things looking very well for them. They made some interesting signings over the summer. One of particular interest, I think, for us was Tobias Grundal, who seems to have settled in quite nicely, at least from what I've seen him, mostly in the European League. But 9 wins for them from 10. And besides, maybe a few words on GOG and what is looking like a very tight race, at least among the top 4 in Denmark.
They've been absolutely amazing, GOG and Grøndal in particular. Also, I would have to add, lucky as hell in some of the matches, because they were almost losing in Grænsted, the team who promoted. They've had several matches very tight where they won in the last 5 minutes. They had the first time they were just about to lose was in Nordsjælland, where it ended in a draw. But actually, they were, with 2 seconds left, they got the ball and the keeper threw directly at the goal and hit the post. So he was like, centimeters from actually doing the 8th win for them at that point. So they've had luck in their games. They did, but they've played amazing. And if you if you see the games, I don't remember if it's been that way in the European games. I haven't seen them all, but Tobias Grøndal is not only the playmaker, he's an assistant coach, I would
Oh, yeah.
say. You can see how every time they have a timeout, Kasper Christensen, who is in Denmark seen as a very talented coach, possibly, the next Nikolaj Krikau, he lets Tobias Grøndal, do the offensive tactics in many of the timeouts, and Grøndal has been outstanding, one of the best in this season in the whole Danish league. So they're on a roll right now, and they've been able to, I also think, actually do even better than they expected themselves. They were aware that it could be, a season where they wouldn't be able to compete with the very best for the title. But I think if we wake them up in their sleep tonight, they would say that and they answer honestly, they would say that they actually now believe they have a chance when we come to spring, and that is massive for them, considering where they were when all the big stars left them a few months ago.
And I saw that game against Aalborg at home a few weeks ago. It was a fantastic performance from them. Fredericia and Bjerringbro Silkeborg also level on points with Aalborg at the moment. It seems like every block of the Danish league is very tight. You have to say, all the way down to Sønderjyske in 11th place. But do you see any of the other contenders making a push for it this season? Anyone impress you in particular?
I've been impressed with Holstebro, who for the last 3 seasons has been absolute rubbish, so to say, and been in down in the last places of the league, has had so many problems for 3 seasons, but somehow Arne Atlason has managed, to get something together for this season. They had some exciting signings this summer. Askenbeck, Swedish right back, coming in, and William Orr from Norway on the left has done lots for them, and they seem like they are able to actually contend, to be able to be a factor when we get to the important games. I don't see them, going to the final, but like that. But compared to the last seasons, they have been a big surprise for many. But it is, Aalborg has all the resources, all the players. If they don't win, it will be a massive disappointment for them. They have to win with the amount of money they spend compared to any other Danish club.
Now, there was some really sad news that came out of Danish handball last week with the passing of Morten Stig Christensen. He's somebody who has had a huge role in many different areas of Danish and international handball over the years as a former player, someone who's worked also in the media, and most recently as a handball politician over the years for Denmark and in the European Handball Federation. I think somebody who those of us deeper in the handball world and everyone in Denmark would know really well, but maybe not a figure who would be so well known among casual fans. So maybe you can share a few words on him, Lars.
Yeah, it was a sad Friday, and still have been all weekend in Danish handball. It was a shock for everybody that he died suddenly. Former Danish national players back in the 70s and 80s. But, after his career, he worked where I work today at TV2. He was brought in when the TV station aired in 1988, made an anchor in sports without any education in being, but it was so popular, and ended up being the head of the department of sports at TV2 back then, before my time. I didn't come to TV2 after he had left. But then he went back to handball in 2007, I think, general secretary in the Danish Federation, and then, getting positions in the European Federation, where he's been talking, the Danish point of view in international matters for so many years, and chairman of the Nations Board in the European Federation, and 3 years ago, then he was made the the chairman, the president of the Danish Federation, when well, a majority of the members of the federation wanted to replace the old president with Morten, so they did. I would say I don't know anybody in Danish handball who has anything bad to say about Morten Stig Christensen. He was a very beloved person. His heart was not only for the elites, the national teams that we all, love to watch, but also for every kid who wants to play handball in age 8 and up. He was very involved in kids handball and all the amateur parts of handball that maybe we don't discuss as much when we do our work, guys. But he was so massively involved in that, and yes, he was a politician in handball, but somehow, when you are involved in politics, even if it's sports politics, you sometimes have to be a bit hard, have a facade of being a tough guy. It seemed to me like he never really, I haven't seen him really, be angry, raise his voice. He probably did in some meetings I wasn't allowed into, but he always seemed like a guy who wanted the dialogue, who wanted to understand other people's points of view instead of just, bullying them and make them, do what he wanted. So he was a dialogue man, and I think that's what made him so beloved everywhere. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a sad week. It was a very big shock for many people as when you're only 65, and I will say only 65, and the amount of people who have contact with you is tremendous. So I haven't met anybody, and I went to games all weekend. Everybody talked about Morten. There was a minute of silence before every match, and everybody is just, shocked still today.
Very nice tribute there, Lars. Thank you for that. Before we let you go then, on the road to Copenhagen, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the latest news that's come from the Danish women's team. You mentioned Jesper Jensen earlier. He's announced his squad for the Women's Euro later this month. It's already November.
It's in
a few weeks. And there's been some big absences in the squad.
Yeah, there has. He's removed some of the biggest trees in the forest, as we would say in Denmark. Well, first of all, I think the biggest news in the team is Sandra Toft is not on it. She's not in. He's decided only to bring 16 players, not 20 as is allowed. He doesn't want any reserves because I think he's experienced the other championships that it's not always good to have players walking around the hotel. Are they gonna go into team? Are they not? It gives more clear roles for everybody to know that we are these 16 and you are the 16 that are going to play the whole tournament. So he's named 16 players, and Sandra Toft is not one of them. Instead, Anna Christensen from Esbjerg will be on the team along with Althea Reinhardt from Odense. I wouldn't say it's a massive shock in Denmark because we have had 3 very competitive keepers for a few years now, but it's still, a player who's I think it's 13 championships in a row she has been on. She's one of this team's biggest profiles and stars for many years, and this was not something that she chose herself. This was a coach decision. So of course it's something people talk about, but also of players that have been along the team for quite a few years. Mette Tranborg, Katrine Heindal, Louise Burgaard, all not selected for this championship. Different reasons. Also Simone Petersen from Ikast also. Some of them have had injury issues. Louise Burgaard hasn't played at all since the Olympics. So there's this natural reasons for them not being selected. But then, of course, two new debutants for the team. One of them you've probably seen in the Champions League with the Nykøbing Falster, Stine Eiberg Jørgensen, will be on the team. Quite a surprise. I don't think if you've asked anybody a month ago, they would have named her in a million years.
Okay.
But, she got a chance in the Golden League. She has some qualities in defense that they could use. And that's given her a spot on the team.
Yeah, interesting times. I think like this Euro is always really interesting in terms of the new cycle, so to speak, and the next generation, Denmark, and the women finally getting their hands again on a Olympic medal. Maybe helped to usher in that transition with some of the players, but you never know. Maybe it's also a case of some of them just being rested for the reasons Alex mentioned earlier, with some of them playing for 2 years straight in some cases. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they get on.
That is an issue, no doubt. Yeah. Not only in Denmark, tired players, mentally tired players who just needs a break. We'll probably, I haven't had time yet, still have the Danish league to cover before I can concentrate on the championships, but I'm sure when we start to see the squads from some of the other nations, it will be the same thing. Players who just simply need rest.
Yeah, they can relax next summer.
We'll let you go. Enjoy the trip to Copenhagen, Lars, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot to Lars for that overview of everything going on in Denmark. Let's hope Simon Dell and Henrik Mølgaard put Aalborg back in line. It's a talented squad, so let's see how they shape up. And maybe Henrik Mølgaard is the future of Aalborg handball, the past, the present, and the future. Let him own this club. Any parting words? Anything to look forward to in the handball world?
Well, yeah, I think we got a sudden sense of urgency as the Women's Euro is just a few weeks away now that November has come. So we'll have to start ramping up to that one as well. And another good reason for anyone listening who hasn't yet signed up to our Patreon and patreon.com/handball hour, as we'll be ramping up our coverage during the major championships for the Euro on the women's side later this month and in December, and then in January for the men's World Championship as well. So that's always a great time to jump in, particularly if you're a bit more of a casual fan with the international tournaments. So join us on Patreon for those. But until then, we'll catch the rest of you in the Morning Club on Patreon. And we'll be back again shortly with another full episode from Alex and myself. It's goodbye.